In this video, we are going to be looking at setting, specifically thinking about that setting is more than just a time and a place. We're going to be looking at Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. And I can tell you right now, it takes place England, France, in the late 1700s. But there's so much more than that. And he's trying to offer, yes, cultural and social meanings to England and France at the time, but he's also turning those into symbols that England comes to represent something for Charles Dickens, that France comes to represent something for Charles Dickens. And we can pick out that symbolism if we pay attention to the details and the imagery and the diction used to describe these two countries. We're going to be looking at chapter 1 of book 1 in A Tale of Two Cities because you see from the title, the period, it's literally just going to describe our setting for us. Our setting in England, our setting in France, and how those two are different. So we're going to look at this. I'm going to use green for any details, diction, or imagery related to England, and blue for any details, imagery, or diction related to France, just so I can keep track of how the two are different from one another. And this isn't a long chapter, but we will go through it. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. Nothing about either country so far, just a lot of paradox. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going to heaven, we were all going direct the other place. In short, the period was so far like the present period. I'll grab another color here. The period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in a superlative degree of comparison only. That's a lot of fancy language there. I want to just pull out right now. Then equals now. That period that he's going to be describing throughout Tale of Two Cities is just like the period that he's writing in. This is going to be 1775, this first chapter. He's writing this book in the mid 1800s, and he's probably trying to use it to offer some insight into how they should respond in the mid 1800s. So we'll keep going. There was a king with a large jaw and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. So England has a king and queen. There was a king with a large jaw and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. In both countries, it was clearer than crystal to the lords of the state preserves of loaves and fishes that things in general were settled forever. So both England and France are monarchies, and everyone seems to just take it for granted that they will always be monarchies. If you know anything about the French Revolution, obviously that will not be the case. So they, at the time, are monarchies, and people are assuming that will be the way that they will always be run. That is the characteristic of England and France. It was the year of our Lord 1775. Spiritual revelations were conceded in England that favored period as at this. So England has some spiritualness to it. Miss Southcott had recently attained her 25th blessed birthday, of whom a prophetic private in the Life Guards had heralded the sublime appearance by announcing the arrangements were made for the swallowing up of London and Westminster. Southcott was just a prophet at the time. Even the Cuckling Ghost had been laid only a dozen round years after rapping out its messages, as the spirits of this very year past, supernaturally deficient in originality, rapped out theirs. So it's just a range of details to emphasize that England had some spiritualness and some maybe a superstitiousness to it. And then also a continued connection, the spirits of this past year, that there's a connection between 1775 and now for Dickens. Mere messages in the earthly order of events had lately come to the English crown and people for Congress of British subjects in America, which, strange to relate, had proved more important to the human race than any communications yet received through any of the chickens of the Cock Lane brood. America is getting ready to revolt against England. That's just what he's saying there. France, less favored on the whole as matter spiritual. So France isn't spiritual. Then her sister, the shield and trident, rolled with exceeding smoothness downhill. So we're getting the detail that France isn't spiritual, or it isn't as spiritual in the same way as England is. That she is operating according to a different system. And that things aren't going very well. Things aren't great. So this is a detail about the setting that Dickens has provided for us. It's beyond just 1775 in France. He's trying to give us a sense of what France was like at the time. And we need to layer that with our sense of the French Revolution. He's saying it's going downhill. Well, why might it be going downhill? Well, because the French Revolution is coming. Under the guidance of her Christian pastors, she entertained herself besides with such humane achievements as sentencing a youth to have his hands cut off, his tongue torn out, and with pincers, and his body burned alive. Oh my goodness. Because he had not kneeled down in the rain to do honor to a dirty procession of monks which passed within his view, at a distance of some 50 or 60 yards. So Dickens hasn't told us anything outright here, but he has given us a detail about the setting of France. Sentencing a youth to lots of punishments because he didn't honor a procession of monks. So England might be superstitious and venerate these spiritual ideas. France is punishing those who aren't being properly venerable. Even though that as a country, it seems that she is less superstitious than England. As likely enough, rooted in the woods of France and Norway, there were growing trees that would, when that sufferer was put to death, already marked by the woodman fate, to come down and be sawn into boards, to make a certain movable framework, with a stack and a knife in it, terrible in history. It is likely enough that in the rough outhouses of some tillers of the heavy hands adjacent to Paris, there were sheltered from weather that very day rude carts bespattered with rustic mire, snuffled out by pigs, and roosted in by poultry, which the farmer Depp had already set apart to be his tumbrils in the Revolution. So I'm getting some more details about France here. That it's quick to put people to death, to sentence them, to hold them in its power. But it also has some farmers nearby. That it's a rustic, albeit poor, countryside. And then we're going to jump down to this last English passage. In England, there was scarcely amount of order. So there's no order. Well, not much order. Not much order. And protection to justify much national boasting. England, we might not be putting people to death, but there's nothing to boast about. Daring burglaries were by armed men, and highway robberies took place in the capital itself each night. Families were publicly cautioned. So crime. Families were publicly cautioned not to go out of town without removing their furniture to upholsterers' warehouses for security. The highwayman in the dark was a city tradesman in the light, and being recognized and challenged by his fellow tradesmen, whom he stopped in his character of the captain, gallantly shot him through the head and rode away. Mayo was waylaid by 7 robbers, and the guard shot 3 dead, and then got shot dead himself by the other 4. So there's more crime than protection. That the Mail has these guards there to try and protect it from robbers, but there's so many robbers that even if the guard's able to kill some, not doing much in the long run. After which the Mail was robbed in peace. That magnificent potentiate, the Lord Mayor of London, was made to stand and deliver at Turnham Green by one highwayman. Even the Mayor of London isn't safe. Who despoiled the illustrious creature in sight of his retinue. Prisoners in London jails fought battles with their turnkeys in the majesty of the law, fired blunderbusses in among them, loaded with rounds of shot and ball. Thieves sniped off diamond crosses from the necks of noble lords at cross drawing rooms. Musketeers went into St. Giles to search for contraband items, and mob fired on the musketeers. And the musketeers fired on the mob. There's lots of shooting. That's my impression of England here. Lots of shooting. And nobody thought any of these occurrences much out of the common way. This is all normal. In the midst of them, the hangman, ever busy, and even worse than useless, was in constant requisition, now stringing up long rows of miscellaneous criminals, now hanging a housebreaker on Saturday who had been taken on Tuesday, now burning people in the hands of Newgate by the dozen, and now burning pamphlets at the door of Westminster Hall. Today taking the life of an adulterous murderer, and tomorrow wretched pilferer who had robbed a farmer's boy of 6 pence. England is killing everybody. Actually, there's no distinction among the all. All these things, and 1,000 like them, came to pass in and close upon the dear old year 1775. Inspired by them, while the woodman and farmer worked unheeded, those 2 great of the large jaws, and those other 2 of the plain and fair faces, so the kings and the queens, trod with stir enough, and carried their divine rights by high hands. Thus the year 1775 conduct their greatnesses, in myriads of small creatures, the creatures of this chronicle among the rest, along the roads that lay before them. So we have a lot of information here about England and about France that's going to take place in this story. And it's not. It's going beyond the years and just the countries. It's trying to give us details about the social ramifications of those countries, and we can use that so we could guess about kind of how these countries will operate as symbols in the story as we read this together. Sorry, I'm going to try and focus this together. So if I'm thinking about France, France is quick to punish, and not just punish, to torture, lack of respect. It has a lot of poverty, because I know it has a rustic, poor countryside, and it has stirring within it the seeds of revolution. England, on the other hand, it's spiritual, lots of crime, and poverty as people try to survive. But it kind of lacks the revolutionary spirit. Instead of getting concerned, instead of gathering up the trees to make the guillotine, the English people say, oh, we'll just rob. we'll rob the rich, we'll hold up the mayor of London. That's fine. Doesn't bother us. Um, and so you can kind of get a sense of the differences between these two countries. France is quick to torture. They're trying to hold the people in their grasps. And they're doing it by punishing and very publicly punishing anything that seems wrong. They're going to take this youth, tear out his tongue with pincers, burn him alive, all these things. Whereas England is just kind of imprisoning them and then killing them. But you can be killed for anything. You might as well go for the boldness if you're going to be killed for no matter what. And so we get the sense of France maybe has an ordered government, but so dissatisfied people. And England maybe has a less ordered government, and so less dissatisfied people. Or the people feel like they can find new ways to find meaning in their life or to find a solution to this problem. So they aren't looking to revolt quite yet, even though they both face poverty. So in a way, these become symbols of each other, or they become symbols of setting. France, ordered government for dissatisfied people that we can imagine is going to go towards disorder. And England that seems to be able to continue with its system. There's an order to the disorder of the government. They have a system that's working. It's not a great system, but they have a system that's working. Whereas France seems to be something that this can't last. And Dickens will kind of pull this out a little bit more as the story develops. But we're getting a first look at that and make some inferences about the symbolic value of the governments, of these locations, of setting, even as we are in the first chapter of the book. So this is how we can kind of pull out setting as more than just place and time, and also thinking about how it comes to function as a symbol because of that.